The phone shattered the silence at 6 in the morning. I fumbled for it in the darkness of my beach house bedroom, still groggy after 3 weeks of recovering from the exhaustion of my son's wedding. Harold, the guard from my downtown apartment building, was frantic. My daughter-in-law Tessa was in the lobby with 4 moving men and legal documents, claiming she was the new owner and demanding access to remove all the furniture. My heart pounded hard against my ribs, but then I remembered. A slow smile spread across my face in the darkness. I told Harold calmly to let them in. Not to stop them. They were about to discover my surprise. I sat up in bed, my heart still racing but my mind suddenly sharp and focused. The ocean waves outside my window should have been calming, but nothing could calm me now. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "Harold, describe exactly what documents she's showing you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I heard papers rustling on the other end. Harold's voice was shaking. "It's a notarized deed transfer, Mrs. Morrison, dated 2 weeks ago. Says your son Bradley transferred ownership of the apartment to Tessa Morrison. His signature is right here on the bottom." My blood ran cold. 2 weeks ago. Bradley had been on his honeymoon 2 weeks ago. This couldn't be right. Bradley would never sign away the apartment I'd bought for him. I'd purchased that place 28 years ago when Bradley was just 2 years old, scraping together every penny I had. It was supposed to be his inheritance, his security. Now it was worth about $1.2 million, sitting in the prime downtown district. 3 bedrooms, 2,000 square feet, filled with family heirlooms. My mother's antique furniture, irreplaceable photographs spanning 3 generations. I'd been letting Bradley and Tessa stay there during their engagement, just temporarily while they got settled. That was 4 months ago. 4 short months. And now this. "Harold, are you sure the signature looks real?" I asked, though I already knew what he'd say. "It looks exactly like Mr. Bradley's signature, ma'am. I've seen him sign for packages 100 times. And the notary seal looks legitimate too. I don't know what to tell you." She's very insistent, and she's dressed in expensive clothes, designer everything. She's on her phone right now, seems to be talking to a lawyer. "The building manager just got here, Gerald, and he looks as confused as I am." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. 2 months ago, when I first started noticing the way Tessa looked at things in the apartment, calculating their value with her eyes, asking pointed questions about what Bradley would inherit someday, I'd started to suspect. Call it a mother's intuition, call it paranoia, but I'd started to see her clearly. The sweetness was a mask. The vulnerability she showed Bradley was an act. I saw the cold calculation underneath. So I'd done something that seemed crazy at the time. I'd moved everything valuable out of that apartment. Every single piece of real furniture went into a climate-controlled storage unit 40 miles away. My mother's antique dining table, the hand-carved chairs, the Persian rugs, the oil paintings, the silverware, everything. I replaced it all with cheap replicas from discount furniture stores. The leather sofa became a convincing fake that cost me $300 instead of $3,000. The antique frames stayed, but I replaced our family photos with stock images of similar-looking people. The jewelry was already in my safety deposit box. All the important documents, birth certificates, titles, everything, were secure. The apartment looked exactly the same, but nothing in it was real. "Harold," I said, and I couldn't help the small smile that crept into my voice. "Let them take everything. Don't call the police. Don't try to stop them. I'll handle this." "But Mrs. Morrison, are you sure? That's a lot of furniture. These movers look professional. They've got a big truck waiting outside." "I'm absolutely sure. Let her have it all." I hung up and immediately called Bradley. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. 5 times I called, each time feeling my dread growing heavier in my chest. Why wasn't he answering? Bradley always answered my calls, always. I left a message, trying not to sound as panicked as I felt. "Bradley, honey, it's Mom. Call me immediately. It's urgent. I mean it, as soon as you get this." I looked at the clock. 6:30 in the morning. The drive back to the city would take 3 hours. maybe less if I pushed it. I threw on clothes, grabbed my purse and keys, and was in my car by 6:45. The sun was just starting to paint the sky pink as I pulled out of the driveway. Every 30 minutes as I drove, Harold called with updates. Tessa and the movers were loading everything onto the truck. They were being careful, professional, treating each piece like it mattered. Tessa looked triumphant, he said. She was directing the men, checking items off on a list, taking photos with her phone. The building manager, Gerald, was just watching, helpless, without clear proof of who actually owned what. The highway stretched ahead of me, and I pressed harder on the gas pedal. Something was very wrong. Bradley not answering, Tessa making this move so boldly, the timing of everything. It felt orchestrated. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. It wasn't Bradley. It was Marcus, Bradley's best friend since college. His voice was shaking so badly, I could barely understand him at first. Alondra, I don't know if you've heard, but Bradley is in the hospital. The car swerved slightly. I steadied it, my hands suddenly slick with sweat on the steering wheel. What? What happened? He was found unconscious in a hotel room last night. Severe allergic reaction. He's in the ICU. I heard from his coworker, Jenny. She called me this morning. Alondra, Tessa hasn't been to see him. She hasn't called anyone. Nobody can reach her. Jenny only knew to call me because she found my number in Bradley's desk at work. My mind was racing. Bradley was deathly allergic to shellfish. Had been since he was 7 years old. He carried an EpiPen everywhere, was meticulous about asking ingredients at restaurants. An allergic reaction severe enough to put him in the ICU meant he'd ingested a significant amount. Marcus, does Tessa know he's in the hospital? She must. She was with him at dinner last night, according to the hotel staff. She's listed as his emergency contact. The hospital has been trying to reach her all night. And then it clicked into place with horrible clarity. Tessa knew. She knew Bradley was hospitalized, incapacitated, unable to stop her, and she was using this exact window to steal everything. This wasn't opportunism. This was planned, calculated. She'd known exactly when to strike. I'm on my way to the hospital right now, I said. Which one? Marcus gave me the name, St. Catherine's Medical Center, only 20 minutes from where I was. Marcus, do me a favor. Don't tell anyone you told me. Don't let on that you know Tessa hasn't been there. Can you do that? Of course. Alondra, what's going on? I'll explain everything later. Thank you for calling me. I hung up and changed direction, taking the next exit toward the hospital. My hands were shaking now. Bradley had been unconscious all night. Tessa had been with him at dinner. She knew about his allergy. They'd only been married 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And she was already trying to destroy him. St. Catherine's Medical Center loomed ahead. A massive glass and steel structure that always looked too modern, too cold. I parked haphazardly and ran inside, not caring about the meter, not caring about anything except getting to my son. The ICU was on the 7th floor. I rushed out of the elevator and nearly collided with a nurse at the station. I'm here to see Bradley Morrison. I'm his mother. The nurse, a young woman with kind eyes, checked her computer. He's in room 712. He's stable now, but he's still unconscious. Are you immediate family? I'm his mother, I repeated. She hesitated. His wife is listed as the primary contact, and she specifically requested that only she be allowed in. Let me check with the charge nurse. Something hot and angry flared in my chest. His wife hasn't been here at all, has she? The nurse's eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, or concern. I can't really discuss that, but let me get the charge nurse. 5 minutes of arguing later, I was finally allowed into Bradley's room. What I saw made my knees weak. My son, my strong, healthy 30-year-old son, was surrounded by machines. Tubes ran from his arms, monitors beeped steadily, and his face was swollen and pale. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. I sat in the chair beside his bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. I'm here, baby. Mom's here. A doctor came in. a tired-looking man in his 50s with silver hair. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Dr. Phillips. Your son had a severe anaphylactic reaction to shellfish. His throat closed up, and he went into cardiac arrest before the paramedics arrived. They managed to resuscitate him, but he's been unconscious for 9 hours now. We're monitoring him closely. The next 24 hours are critical." "He's always been so careful about his allergy," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "The hotel staff said he had dinner with his wife at the hotel restaurant. According to the waiter, she ordered for both of them. Your son ate a seafood pasta dish. The waiter assumed the wife knew it was safe for him. She ordered for him. Tessa knew about Bradley's allergy. I'd heard her discuss it with him a dozen times. She knew he couldn't have shellfish. She knew exactly what she was doing. I stayed with Bradley for an hour, talking to him, telling him I was there, that everything would be okay. His hand was warm in mine, but he didn't squeeze back. He didn't move at all. Finally, I forced myself to leave and head to the apartment. I needed to see the damage, needed to understand the full scope of what Tessa had done. The apartment was on the 32nd floor of a luxury building downtown. I'd bought it as an investment, back when the neighborhood was still developing. Now it was one of the most sought-after addresses in the city. I rode the elevator up, my stomach churning. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into emptiness. Everything was gone. Not just the furniture I'd expected her to take. Everything. The curtain rods had been removed, leaving bare walls. Light fixtures were missing, leaving exposed wires. Cabinet hardware in the kitchen had been unscrewed and taken. The place looked ransacked, violated. Even the cheap towel racks in the bathroom were gone. I walked through each room in a daze. My footsteps echoed on the bare hardwood floors. In what used to be the master bedroom, I found Gerald, the building manager, standing with a clipboard. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, looking deeply uncomfortable. "I'm so sorry about all this. She had documentation. We had to let her in. Show me." He handed me copies of the papers. The deed transfer looked completely legitimate. Professional letterhead. Proper legal language. Dated 2 weeks ago. Right in the middle of Bradley and Tessa's honeymoon. Bradley's signature was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The notary stamp looked real, complete with an embossed seal and signature. "Transfer of ownership for $1 and other considerations," I read aloud. "Marital property transfer." But something about the notary stamp felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was off. The signature was too perfect, maybe. Or the stamp was positioned oddly on the page. I took photos of everything with my phone. "Gerald, I'm going to fight this. This isn't legitimate." He nodded sympathetically. "I hope you're right." She was very cold about the whole thing. Didn't seem like a woman who just married the love of her life. She seemed more like someone conducting a business transaction. I left the apartment and drove straight to my attorney's office. Patricia Chen had handled my legal matters for 15 years. She was sharp, thorough, and didn't suffer fools. If anyone could help me, it was Patricia. Wait, Patricia Chen. I suddenly realized I'd been thinking of her name wrong. Let me correct that. Patricia Warren. Patricia Warren had been my attorney for 15 years. Patricia's office was in a high-rise on 4th Street. I didn't have an appointment, but her receptionist took one look at my face and went to get her immediately. Patricia listened to everything, examined the photos of the documents on my phone, and her expression grew darker with every word. "The deed transfer appears legitimate on the surface," she said finally. "But if Bradley signed under duress, or if he was coerced, or if he didn't understand what he was signing, we can challenge it. The problem is proving any of that. It could take years in court and cost tens of thousands in legal fees. Meanwhile, legally, Tessa owns the apartment. She tried to kill him," I said flatly. "She fed him shellfish knowing he's deathly allergic." Patricia's eyes widened. "Can you prove that?" "The hotel waiter said she ordered for him. The doctor said he ate seafood pasta. Bradley has carried an EpiPen since he was 7 years old. Everyone who knows him knows about his allergy. She's been with him for months. She knew. That's suspicious, certainly, but proving intent is difficult. Was she there when the reaction happened? I don't know. I need to find out more. Patricia made some notes. Here's what worries me more. As Bradley's wife, Tessa has legal rights to make medical decisions for him if he can't make them himself. If Bradley stays unconscious for an extended period, she controls everything. His bank accounts, his assets, his medical care. You, as his mother, have no legal standing to intervene. We need Bradley to wake up and revoke this deed transfer. Until then, our hands are somewhat tied. The weight of that statement settled over me like a heavy blanket. Tessa was in control. Completely in control. Patricia's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. I see. Thank you. She hung up and looked at me. That was my investigator. I asked him to do a quick background check on Tessa after you called this morning. Alondra. She's already been to the bank. My heart dropped into my stomach. Using the marriage certificate and the deed transfer as proof of financial interest, she had herself added to Bradley's checking account and his investment account. His checking account had $53,000. His investment account had $230,000. She withdrew $40,000 in cash this morning and transferred $100,000 to an offshore account. The bank flagged it as suspicious, but legally they couldn't stop her. She's his wife. I couldn't breathe. $293,000, gone or moved where we couldn't touch it. Bradley's life savings, his security, everything he'd worked for since graduating college. There's more, Patricia said quietly. The investigator found something else. Tessa's name isn't really Tessa Morrison. Before she married Bradley, she was Tessa Caldwell. Before that, she was Teresa Hayes. Before that, she was Terry Winters. She's used at least 3 different identities in 3 different states over the past 10 years. The room seemed to tilt. What? She's done this before. Twice that we can find so far. 2 previous marriages, one in Arizona, one in Nevada. Both ended with the husband either dying under mysterious circumstances or disappearing completely. Both times, she walked away with everything. The investigator is still digging, but Alondra, your daughter-in-law, is a professional con artist, and she's very, very good at what she does. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat in my beach house living room with papers spread across the coffee table, trying to make sense of everything Patricia's investigator had found. Tessa Caldwell, Teresa Hayes, Terry Winters. 3 identities, 3 victims, 3 states. How many other names had she used? How many other men had she destroyed? By dawn, I'd made my decision. I drove back to the city and met Patricia at the courthouse at 8 in the morning. We filed emergency motions, every single one we could think of. A temporary restraining order against Tessa to prevent her from accessing any more of Bradley's assets. A petition for conservatorship over Bradley's affairs due to his incapacitation. A fraud claim challenging the deed transfer. An emergency request for custody of medical decisions. It cost me $15,000 just to file everything. I wrote the check with a shaking hand, watching a huge chunk of my retirement savings disappear. But what choice did I have? This was my son's life. From the courthouse, I went to the police station. A detective named Raymond Tucker met with me in a small, windowless interview room that smelled like old coffee and desperation. I showed him everything. The deed transfer, the bank statements Patricia had obtained, the evidence of Tessa's multiple identities, the timeline of Bradley's allergic reaction. Detective Tucker listened carefully, taking notes, his expression growing more serious as I talked. He was probably in his mid-40s, with gray starting to show at his temples and the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to be straight with you, he said when I finished. This is complicated. The deed transfer, the bank accounts, those are civil matters. Marital property disputes usually don't fall under criminal jurisdiction unless we can prove fraud or theft. And proving that requires solid evidence that would hold up in court. She's tried to kill him, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. She fed him shellfish, knowing he's deathly allergic. I understand your suspicion, And frankly, I share it. But proving attempted murder is extremely difficult. We'd need to show intent. We'd need witnesses who heard her planning it, or evidence that she deliberately put shellfish in his food knowing what would happen. A restaurant waiter saying she ordered for him isn't enough. He might have changed his order. He might have decided to try it despite his allergy. There are too many ways a defense attorney could create reasonable doubt. So you're not going to do anything? I didn't say that. I'm going to investigate. I'll look into her previous marriages, the circumstances around those men's deaths or disappearances. I'll try to establish a pattern. But these things take time, Mrs. Morrison. Weeks, maybe months. And I have to warn you, even if we build a case, getting a conviction is a long shot. I left the police station feeling hollowed out. The legal system was supposed to protect people, but all I was hearing was reasons why they couldn't help. Time, evidence, jurisdiction. Tessa had figured out how to operate in the gray areas where the law couldn't touch her. I went back to the hospital. Bradley's condition had stabilized, the nurse told me. He was starting to wake up, drifting in and out of consciousness. I rushed to his room, hope flaring in my chest for the first time in days. He was still surrounded by machines, but his eyes were open slightly. Unfocused, but open. I took his hand. "Bradley, sweetheart, it's Mom. Can you hear me?" His eyes found my face. He blinked slowly. "You're going to be okay," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "You're going to be fine. But I need to ask you something important. The apartment, the deed transfer. Did you sign anything giving the apartment to Tessa?" His eyes widened, or tried to. Even that small movement seemed to exhaust him. His lips moved behind the oxygen mask. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I leaned closer. "Never signed," he whispered. "Nothing." Then his brow furrowed, and I saw confusion, and then horror cross his face as memories seemed to surface. "Restaurant," he whispered. "Wedding paperwork." She said insurance forms. Multiple documents. I signed. Didn't read. Trusted her. My heart broke watching the realization wash over him. He'd been conned. Completely, thoroughly conned by a woman he loved, a woman he'd married. "It's okay," I said, squeezing his hand. "We're going to fix this. You just focus on getting better." But even as I said it, I saw the devastation in his eyes. This wasn't okay. He'd given her everything. Signed away his inheritance, his security, his future. Given her access to all his accounts. Fallen for every lie she'd told him. He felt humiliated, destroyed. "So stupid," he whispered. "How could I be so stupid?" "You're not stupid. She's a professional. She's done this before. This isn't your fault." But I could see he didn't believe me. The shame on his face was painful to witness. The door opened behind me. I turned, and there she was. Tessa, walking in like she owned the place, dressed in designer clothes I now realized Bradley had probably paid for. Her face arranged itself into an expression of concern when she saw Bradley was awake. "Baby, oh thank God," she said, moving toward the bed. I stepped between them. "Get out." Her eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw the real person underneath. Cold, calculating, empty. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Excuse me? That's my husband. Get out now, or I'll call security. Bradley, tell your mother to leave us alone." Her voice was sweet, pleading. The perfect, concerned wife. Bradley's eyes were closed now. He didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he just didn't want to see her. I walked toward her, forcing her back toward the door. In the hallway, away from the nurses and other visitors, she dropped the act entirely. "You can't prove anything," she said quietly, her voice like ice. Bradley signed willingly. "We're married. Everything was legal. You have nothing." "The apartment is mine," I said. "It's in my name. That deed transfer is fraudulent. That apartment is mine now. Those accounts are mine. And there's not a thing you can do about it." She smiled. A cold, triumphant smile. "You should have been nicer to me when you had the chance. Maybe I would have left you something." She turned and walked back into Bradley's room. I started to follow, but a hand on my arm stopped me. A hospital social worker, a woman named Amanda with a forced smile and a clipboard. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. You're causing a disturbance, and other patients have complained about the yelling. She's trying to kill my son. That's a very serious accusation." Mrs. Tessa Morrison is the legal spouse and has the final say on visitation. "If you continue to cause problems, I'll have to ask you to leave the hospital entirely." I looked past Amanda and saw Tessa standing at Bradley's bedside, one hand on his shoulder, looking every inch the devoted wife to anyone watching. I had no choice. I left. That evening, Patricia called with news that made everything worse. Tessa's attorney, a notorious lawyer named Edward Thorne who specialized in high-conflict marital asset cases, had filed a countersuit. They were claiming I was harassing Tessa, that the furniture she'd removed from the apartment was legally hers as marital property, and that my accusations were defamatory. They were suing me for $1 million in damages. But that wasn't even the worst part. They'd filed for a restraining order against me. Against Emmy, preventing me from contacting Tessa or coming within 500 feet of the apartment. And they'd submitted a petition to the hospital claiming that my visits were detrimental to Bradley's recovery, requesting that I be banned from seeing him. "They're painting you as an unstable, obsessed mother who never accepted Tessa and is now trying to destroy her son's marriage," Patricia said. "Edward Thorne is very good at what he does. He's going to make you look like the villain here." I sat down heavily on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear. How had this happened? How had trying to protect my son turned me into the bad guy? "The restraining order hearing is in 3 days, Patricia continued. "We'll fight it, but Alondra, I have to be honest. With Tessa as the legal wife and Bradley, unable to clearly speak for himself, she has a strong position. And Thorne is going to use the fact that you removed furniture from the apartment before she took it as evidence that you were plotting against her. Your clever plan to protect your belongings is now being used against you." After Patricia hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Every solution I'd tried had created a worse problem. I'd hidden the valuables, but now I looked like I'd been scheming. I'd filed legal motions, but now I was being sued. I'd tried to protect Bradley, but now I might be banned from seeing him. Tessa was 3 steps ahead. Always 3 steps ahead. The restraining order hearing was held in a windowless courtroom that felt like a cage. Edward Thorne was everything I'd feared. Mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from winning cases like this over and over. He painted a picture of me as a controlling, manipulative mother who'd never approved of my son's marriage. He brought witnesses, people I'd never met in my life, who claimed I'd harassed them at various times. Claimed I'd made threatening phone calls to Tessa. "Your Honor," Thorne said, his voice rich with false sympathy. "Mrs. Alondra Morrison has waged a campaign of intimidation against my client since the day she married Bradley Morrison. She's broken into their home, stolen property, filed baseless legal claims, and made wild accusations of attempted murder. This behavior is not just inappropriate, it's dangerous." He played recordings, phone conversations that had been edited to make me sound threatening. My words taken out of context, rearranged, manipulated. In one clip, I was saying to Patricia, "She needs to be stopped." In another, I was telling Marcus, "I'd do anything to protect Bradley." Played the way Thorne presented them, I sounded deranged. My attorney tried to counter, but we had less evidence, less polish, less of everything. Patricia argued that Tessa was the real threat, presented the background check showing her multiple identities, but Thorne had an answer for everything. "My client has been married before, yes. She's widowed. She changed her name after each marriage ended to escape painful memories. That's not a crime, it's a coping mechanism. And Mrs. Morrison's investigation into my client's private history only proves how obsessed and unstable she is." The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 60s, listened to both sides. In the end, she granted a temporary restraining order. I had to stay 500 feet away from Tessa. I couldn't contact her directly. I couldn't come to the apartment. "This is a temporary measure, pending full hearing in 30 days, the judge said. "But Mrs. Morrison, I'm warning you. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that the system was broken, that money and slick lawyers could make lies sound like truth, that I was losing. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Somehow, the story had leaked. Mother-in-law attacks, grieving newlywed. That was the angle they were taking. I pushed through them without comment, but the damage was done. By evening, my name and face were all over the local news. Bradley's recovery became more complicated. I called the hospital every day, but the information I got was minimal. Patient privacy laws, they told me. Only his wife could get detailed updates. I talked to Marcus, who tried to visit but was also turned away. Tessa had given the hospital a list of approved visitors. Her name was the only one on it. Marcus did tell me something troubling. Bradley's co-workers were concerned. He hadn't responded to any work emails in over a week. His boss had called the hospital and been told that Bradley was taking extended medical leave. But Bradley loved his job. He'd never take leave without at least sending an email to his team. Tessa was isolating him, cutting him off from everyone who cared about him. Classic abuser behavior. My financial situation was becoming desperate. Legal fees had climbed to $38,000. My retirement savings were being drained. I sold my car and started using rideshare services. I borrowed $20,000 against the beach house. But I still needed more. Patricia was doing her best to work for reduced rates. But this kind of case required investigators, expert witnesses, court filing fees. It was bleeding me dry. And then there was the furniture. My clever plan had backfired spectacularly. Tessa was now claiming that the cheap furniture I'd provided was worthless junk, that I'd deliberately switched out valuable pieces before the legal transfer to defraud her. She was using it as evidence that I'd been plotting against her all along, that I'd never intended to honor my son's marriage or respect his property rights. Every move I'd made to protect Bradley was being twisted into evidence of my instability and malice. My other son, Garrett, flew in from Seattle. I'd been so focused on Bradley that I'd barely kept him updated. Garrett was 3 years younger than Bradley, an engineer, practical and level-headed. I hoped he'd be an ally, someone who could help me make sense of this nightmare. At first, he was supportive. He listened to everything, looked at the evidence, nodded in all the right places. Then he asked to call Bradley. "I want to hear his side of this," Garrett said. I didn't like it, but I couldn't stop him. Garrett called the hospital and, surprisingly, Tessa allowed him to speak to Bradley. They talked for 20 minutes while I waited anxiously. When Garrett hung up, his expression was troubled. "Mom, I don't know what to think." "What did he say?" "He says you're making everything worse. That Tessa isn't as bad as you think. That he just needs time to heal and work things out with his wife. He says you need to let go." The words hit me like physical blows. Bradley was drugged or confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. He sounded pretty clear to me. "Mom, I'm worried that you're so convinced Tessa is evil that you can't see any other possibility. What if she really does love him? What if this is just a messy situation that you're making messier? She has 3 different identities. Her previous husbands died or disappeared. She stole his money. Or she's been married before and changed her name, which lots of people do. Bradley signed legal documents, which he admits. She moved money that legally belongs to both of them as a married couple. Mom, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not sure you're completely right either." I stared at my younger son, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "You don't believe me. I believe you believe what you're saying. But Mom, you've spent $38,000 on lawyers. You've sold your car. You're borrowing against your house. You've been served with a restraining order. At what point do you step back and consider that maybe, just maybe, you're the one who needs help?" He left the next day. As he hugged me goodbye at the airport, he said, "I love you, Mom, but I can't support this crusade. It's tearing the family apart. If you keep this up, I'm going to have to step away. My wife doesn't want our kids around this kind of drama." I stood in the airport terminal and watched him disappear through security, feeling like I was losing everything. Both my sons, my savings, my reputation, my sanity, according to everyone around me. That night, alone in my beach house, I took my blood pressure medication and my new anxiety pills and stared at the ocean. The stress was literally killing me. I'd been to the emergency room 2 days earlier with chest pains, convinced I was having a heart attack. It was anxiety and dangerously high blood pressure. The doctor had looked at me with pity and told me I needed to let go of whatever was causing this stress before I had a stroke. Even my doctor thought I was the problem. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, wondering if everyone was right. Was I crazy? Was I making this worse? Was Tessa actually just a young woman trying to start her life with Bradley while his overbearing mother destroyed everything? At 2 a.m, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Morrison? The voice was quiet, nervous. Yes? My name is Dorothy. I'm a nurse at St. Catherine's. I'm calling from a personal phone because I could lose my job for this. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. I've been caring for Bradley for the past week. Mrs. Morrison, something is very wrong. His wife has been bringing him supplements, says they're vitamins to help him recover. But since he started taking them 3 days ago, he's become lethargic, confused. Sometimes he doesn't even recognize the other nurses. The medical team thinks it's just fatigue from recovery, but I don't think so. What do you mean? I saw her, Mrs. Tessa Morrison. She was crushing pills into his water when she thought no one was watching. I checked the bottle she left in his drawer when she went to the bathroom. It's a powerful psychiatric medication. Risperidone. It's used for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Bradley doesn't have a prescription for it. He shouldn't be taking it. My heart was racing now. Did you report this? I told my supervisor. She dismissed it. Said I was overstepping, that Mrs. Morrison would never do that I probably missaw what was happening. She told me to drop it or face disciplinary action. Dorothy, thank you for calling me. There's more. Tomorrow morning at 8, a psychiatrist is coming to evaluate Bradley. Mrs. Morrison requested it. She told the doctor that Bradley has been expressing suicidal thoughts, that he needs immediate psychiatric intervention. If he seems confused or unstable during the evaluation, and he will because of the drugs she's giving him, they could commit him involuntarily. Once that happens, she'll have total control. She'll be able to make all his medical decisions, all his financial decisions. He'll be locked in a psychiatric facility, and you'll never be able to reach him. The room was spinning. How do you know this? I overheard her on the phone with someone. She didn't know I was in the room. I was behind the curtain checking the IV. She said, by tomorrow night, he'll be committed, and I'll have power of attorney over everything. Then we liquidate the remaining assets and disappear. Mrs. Morrison, I've been a nurse for 32 years. I've never seen anything like this. This woman is dangerous. Why are you risking your job to tell me this? Because it's the right thing to do, and because nobody else will. Tomorrow at 8. That's your window. After that, I don't think you'll ever get him back. She hung up. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Tomorrow at 8. The psychiatric evaluation. If Tessa succeeded in having Bradley committed, she'd drain every remaining asset and vanish. Bradley would be trapped in a facility, drugged, unable to fight back, while his life was dismantled around him. I had one chance. One desperate, probably illegal, definitely dangerous chance. And if I failed, I'd go to jail and lose any hope of ever helping Bradley. But if I didn't try, I'd lose him anyway. I didn't sleep. How could I? By 5 a.m, I was dressed, my hands shaking as I tried to drink coffee. I'd spent the night planning, and every scenario ended badly. But doing nothing was worse. At 6:30, I left the beach house and drove toward the hospital. Dorothy had told me the psychiatric evaluation was at 8. Bradley was on the 5th floor, room 512. Hospital shift change was at 7, with a 20-minute window where coverage was minimal. I'd borrowed scrubs from an old friend, Natalie, who'd been a nurse before retiring. I had an old volunteer ID badge from 2 years ago when I'd done candy striper work at a different hospital. It had expired, but in the chaos of shift change, maybe no one would look closely. This was insane. I was violating a restraining order. If caught, I'd be arrested. Everything I'd recorded or documented would be inadmissible because I'd obtained it illegally. Tessa would use this as final proof that I was unstable and dangerous. But Bradley was being drugged. He was going to be committed based on lies. I couldn't stand by and let it happen. I entered through a service entrance at 6:50. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I kept my head down, walking like I belonged there. A security guard glanced at my badge but didn't stop me. The elevator seemed to take forever. 5th floor. The nurses' station was busy with shift change. Nurses clustered around computers, talking in low voices about patient handoffs. I walked past like I knew where I was going. Room 512 was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Bradley was alone. I slipped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. He was in bed, eyes half open, staring at nothing. The cheerful Bradley I knew was gone. This person looked hollow, absent. "Bradley, it's Mom," I whispered, moving to his bedside. His eyes found me slowly. "Mom, I need you to listen. You're being drugged. Tessa is giving you psychiatric medication you don't need. She's trying to have you committed so she can take everything." He blinked slowly. "Committed?" From my purse, I pulled out a drug testing kit I'd bought at a pharmacy. "I need to test your urine. Can you help me?" He had a catheter. I felt terrible doing it, but I collected a sample and ran the test. 2 minutes later, the results were clear. Positive for risperidone, a powerful antipsychotic. I took photos of the test strip, photos of the medication bottles on his bedside table that Tessa had left. "Bradley, do you understand what I'm telling you? She's drugging you. She's going to have you committed today." Committed. He repeated the word like he was trying to understand a foreign language. I heard voices in the hallway. Running out of time, I quickly placed a small voice recorder I'd bought behind the medical equipment on the wall, tucked it where it wouldn't be easily seen. If I could capture Tessa saying anything incriminating, anything at all, it might help. The door opened. Tessa walked in, carrying a coffee cup and her phone. She froze when she saw me. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then her face transformed into fury. "What are you doing here? You're violating a restraining order. I know what you're doing. I know about the drugs. You're insane." She was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling security." I moved toward the door, knowing I had to leave now. But as I passed Tessa, I heard her on the phone with someone, and she was speaking freely, probably thinking Bradley was too drugged to understand or remember. "Yes, it's happening today. The evaluation is at 8. He'll fail it. We'll have him committed by this afternoon. Then we liquidate everything. 3 to 4 days and we're done here. Phoenix is waiting." She said it so casually, like she was discussing dinner plans. I reached the hallway just as 2 security guards appeared. "That's her," Tessa said, pointing at me. "She's violating a restraining order. She broke into my husband's room. Arrest her." I ran. It was stupid, but I ran. Down the hallway, past the nurse's station, the security guards shouting behind me. I made it to the stairwell and flew down the stairs, my lungs burning. 5 floors. By the time I burst out the ground floor exit, I was gasping for breath. I made it to my car, started the engine, and drove away before they could get my license plate. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I'd gotten the drug test results. I'd gotten photos. I'd hidden the recorder. But I'd also just committed a crime. Tessa would use this. She'd paint me as dangerous, unstable, a threat. Everything was falling apart. I drove straight to Patricia's office, not caring that it was only 7:30 in the morning. I called her from the parking lot. She met me in her office 10 minutes later, her hair still wet from a shower, and listened to everything. "The drug test results prove he's being medicated without proper prescription." Patricia said, examining the photos. But Alondra, you obtained this evidence illegally. You violated a restraining order. You're going to be arrested. I don't care. We need to stop that psychiatric evaluation. She made phone calls. Emergency calls to judges, to the hospital administration, to Detective Raymond. By 8:15, we were in front of a judge in an emergency hearing. The judge was skeptical at first. But as Patricia laid everything out, the drug test, the pattern with previous victims, the recording I'd managed to capture, his expression changed. "This is highly irregular," he said. "But if what you're suggesting is true, we have a vulnerable adult at risk. I'm going to order the hospital to delay the psychiatric evaluation pending an investigation. I'm ordering immediate blood work on Bradley Morrison to test for unauthorized medications. And I want both parties in my courtroom this afternoon for a full hearing." We left the courthouse feeling like maybe, finally, we'd caught a break. Detective Raymond called me as we were walking to the car. "Alondra, the hospital just reported that Tessa checked Bradley out AMA. Against medical advice. She's taken him somewhere." Everything froze. "What?" "Hospital security saw them leave about 20 minutes ago. She had him in a wheelchair. He looked barely conscious. They got into a car with an unknown driver and left. I've put out an alert, but she has a head start." Patricia's investigator called moments later. I traced the license plate. The car is registered to Whispering Pines Psychiatric Facility, about 3 hours north. It's a private facility that specializes in long-term psychiatric care. They're known for taking patients without extensive documentation, as long as someone can pay cash. I've heard rumors that place is basically a warehouse for wealthy families who want difficult relatives to disappear. Detective Raymond was already in his car. I'm heading there now. I've contacted police in that jurisdiction, but red tape is slowing things down. They need warrants, probable cause. It's going to take time. "We don't have time," I said. Patricia looked at me. "If we go there, and if we try to intervene without proper legal authority, everything we do could be thrown out of court. I don't care anymore. That's my son." We drove together. Patricia, Detective Raymond, and me. 3 hours of the longest drive of my life. Every minute knowing that Tessa was getting Bradley admitted into that facility, that once he was inside and paperwork was signed, getting him out could take weeks or months. The facility was exactly as grim as I'd imagined. A low, sprawling concrete building in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by high fences. It looked more like a prison than a hospital. Detective Raymond went to the main entrance. Security wouldn't let him in without warrants. They claimed patient privacy, facility regulations. He argued, but they stood firm. I didn't wait for legal process. I walked right through the front door, past the protesting security guard, into the reception area. "I'm here to see Bradley Morrison." He was just admitted. The receptionist, a bored-looking woman in her 50s, checked her computer. "He was admitted about 40 minutes ago. Are you family?" "I'm his mother." She looked uncertain. "Let me check with the admitting physician." Before she could make the call, I saw Tessa. She was down a hallway, visible through a glass window, signing papers with a man in a white coat. The facility administrator, probably. I walked toward them. The receptionist called after me, but I ignored her. I pushed open the door to the office. Tessa's face went sheet white when she saw me. "What are you doing here? How did you find us?" The man in the white coat stood up, confused. "Who is this?" "I'm Bradley Morrison's mother. And you need to stop whatever you're doing right now." I pulled out my phone and showed him everything. The drug test results. The photos of Tessa's multiple identities. The information about her previous victims. Detective Raymond's investigator had compiled it all into a single document, and I'd loaded it onto my phone. This woman is not trying to help her husband. She's trying to trap him here so she can steal his assets. She's drugged him. She's lied to you. And if you admit him based on her word alone, you're going to be complicit in a crime. The administrator looked at the documents, his face growing pale. Then he looked at Tessa. "Is this true?" "She's lying." She's been harassing me for weeks. She has a restraining order against her. She's not even supposed to be near me." Detective Raymond appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath from running. "Dr. Winston, I'm Detective Raymond Tucker. I'm investigating this case. I strongly advise you to halt this admission until we can verify the circumstances." Dr. Winston looked between all of us. Then he carefully set down his pen. "I think we need to pause this process. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to need to see your husband before we proceed further." "He's resting," Tessa said quickly. "He's very fragile. He can't be disturbed." "I insist," Dr. Winston said firmly. He led us down a hallway to a small room. Bradley was on a bed, barely conscious, his eyes unfocused. A nurse was setting up an IV. "Stop," Dr. Winston said to the nurse. "Don't administer anything until I say so." He examined Bradley, checking his pupils, his vital signs. "How much sedation has he had?" The nurse checked her chart. Mrs. Morrison said he was agitated during transport. She requested we give him 10 milligrams of diazepam to calm him. "On whose medical authority?" She said his regular physician prescribed it. Dr. Winston turned to Tessa. "I need to see documentation from his physician. I need his complete medical records. And I need to know what other medications he's been taking." Tessa's composure was cracking. "I don't have time for this. I'm his wife. I have the legal right to make his medical decisions. Either admit him now or I'll take him to another facility." "Ma'am, I'm not comfortable proceeding without proper documentation, especially given these allegations." I moved to Bradley's bedside. "Bradley, can you hear me?" His eyes found mine. There was recognition there, and something else. Fear. Relief. He tried to speak but couldn't form words. "Did you want to come here?" I asked him. He shook his head weakly. "No. Do you want help?" He nodded. "Yes." Detective Raymond stepped forward. "Based on what I'm seeing here, I have probable cause to believe a crime is being committed. Mrs. Teresa Morrison, or whatever your real name is, you're being detained for questioning." Tessa made a break for the door. 2 facility security guards blocked her path. Everything happened quickly after that. Local police arrived. Tessa was taken into custody for questioning. Bradley's sedation was stopped. Medical staff began properly examining him, documenting everything. Over the next several hours, as medications cleared his system, Bradley became more lucid. He confirmed everything. Tessa had been giving him pills. He'd thought they were vitamins. When he started feeling foggy and confused, she told him it was just stress from the allergic reaction. When the hospital wanted to run tests, she convinced them he was fine. When he tried to call me or Marcus, she took his phone away, said we were causing him stress. She'd isolated him completely, drugged him, and nearly succeeded in having him permanently committed. The investigation moved quickly once it started. Detective Raymond had been building a case for days, just waiting for enough evidence to move forward. Now he had it. Tessa's real identity was Teresa Winfield. She was wanted in 2 states for fraud. Her first victim, a man named Howard in Arizona, was found in a state psychiatric facility where he'd been for 6 years. He'd been declared mentally incompetent in a rushed proceeding. All his assets liquidated by Teresa under a different name, and then he'd been abandoned there. The facility had been trying to contact his family for years, but all the contact information Teresa had provided was fake. The second victim, a man named Douglas in Nevada, had supposedly died in a car accident, but when investigators looked deeper, they found inconsistencies. The body had been cremated immediately, no autopsy performed. Douglas's bank accounts had been emptied 2 days before his death. There was an ongoing investigation into whether he was actually dead or had also been institutionalized somewhere under a false identity. Edward Thorne, Tessa's attorney, claimed he'd had no idea about any of this. He produced emails and documents showing that Tessa had presented herself as a legitimate client, that he'd done standard background checks, and found nothing suspicious. He was covering himself, probably lying, but he was smart enough to have created plausible deniability. The deed transfer was officially declared fraudulent. A handwriting expert examined Bradley's signature and found subtle inconsistencies suggesting it had been forged. The notary stamp was fake, a convincing replica but not legitimate. The whole document was a fabrication. The apartment was returned to my name. The bank accounts were frozen, and the process began to recover the stolen funds. Some of the money was gone, spent, or hidden in offshore accounts that would take years to trace. But most of it was recovered. And then there was my surprise. The thing I'd told Harold that morning, the reason I'd smiled when I heard Tessa was taking the furniture. 2 months earlier, when I first started suspecting Tessa's true nature, I'd done more than just move valuables out of the apartment. I'd installed hidden cameras throughout the entire place. Tiny, wireless cameras disguised as smoke detectors, as phone chargers, as picture frames. They uploaded everything to cloud storage automatically. Every moment Tessa had spent in that apartment for the past 2 months was recorded. Her conversations with accomplices, her practicing forging Bradley's signature, her researching psychiatric medications and how to use them, her coaching the people who would later testify against me, telling them exactly what to say, her planning every step of the con with cold precision. When Tessa and the movers came to take the furniture, I'd watched it all remotely from my beach house. I'd heard her bragging to the movers about how easy it had been to fool Bradley. I'd heard her on the phone with someone named Vincent, discussing how much they'd make from this job. I'd seen her examining the deed transfer documents, laughing about how the notary stamp she'd ordered online looked perfectly real. All of it was captured. All of it was evidence. That was my surprise. Not just cheap furniture, complete documentation of her entire scheme. The cameras had been installed by a licensed private investigator, with proper documentation showing reasonable suspicion. The footage was admissible in court, and it destroyed Tessa's defense completely. When Patricia showed the videos to the prosecutor, they immediately added multiple charges: fraud, forgery, attempted kidnapping, assault for drugging Bradley, conspiracy. The charges kept mounting. Tessa's bail was set at $2 million. She couldn't make it. She sat in county jail while her case proceeded toward trial. But my relief was tempered by the cost of everything. I'd spent $70,000 on legal fees. Some of it would eventually be recovered through restitution, but the process would take years. I'd sold my car. I'd borrowed against the beach house. I'd depleted my retirement savings. I'd aged 10 years in a few weeks. My blood pressure was still dangerously high. I was on medication for anxiety, and Bradley was traumatized. Physically, he recovered within a few weeks. The medications cleared his system. His allergic reaction healed. But emotionally, he was devastated. He'd been conned, manipulated, drugged, and nearly destroyed by someone he loved. Someone he'd trusted completely. The betrayal cut so deep I wasn't sure he'd ever fully recover. He came to stay with me at the beach house while he healed. We'd sit on the porch and watch the ocean, not talking much. What was there to say? He'd lost his wife, his savings, his sense of judgment. He felt humiliated and stupid, even though none of it was his fault. Garrett flew back in, full of apologies. He'd been wrong. He'd doubted me when he should have supported me. Our relationship was strained, but we were working on it. Family bonds had been tested, but they'd held. Dorothy, the nurse who'd risked her job to call me, was quietly given a commendation by the hospital administration once everything came to light. She'd done the right thing when everyone else had looked the other way. Patricia Warren became more than just my attorney. She became a friend. Someone who'd stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. Detective Raymond closed multiple cases with Tessa's arrest. He told me there might be other victims, other men she'd destroyed over the years under other names. The investigation was ongoing. 3 months after that terrible morning phone call, things started to feel almost normal again. Bradley had gone back to work, though he'd changed positions to a different department. Too many people knew the story. He needed a fresh start. The apartment was mine again, though I'd decided to sell it. Too many bad memories. The money from the sale would help me rebuild my retirement savings. One afternoon, Bradley drove up to the beach house. I was sitting on the porch with coffee, watching pelicans dive for fish. He sat down beside me. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "You don't need to thank me." "I do. You saved my life. Everyone told you to stop. Everyone said you were wrong. But you knew. You kept fighting even when it cost you everything. Even when I told you to stop." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I put you through all this." I took his hand. "You fell in love with someone who seemed wonderful. That's not a crime. She was a professional. She'd done this before. She knew exactly how to manipulate people. This wasn't your fault. How did you know? How did you see through her when I couldn't?" I thought about that for a long time. I think it was just instinct. Little things that didn't add up. The way she looked at objects instead of people. The questions she asked about money and assets. How quickly she wanted to get married. And maybe just a mother's intuition. I knew you, and I knew something was wrong when you started changing around her. You stopped being yourself. "I want to trust people again someday," he said. "But right now, I don't know if I can." "You will. It'll take time. You're seeing a therapist, which helps, and you'll be more careful next time." "We all will." He smiled slightly. "There's not going to be a next time for a long time. I think I'm done with relationships for a while." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun start its descent toward the horizon. The ocean was calm today, gentle waves rolling in and out in an eternal rhythm. Looking back on everything, I could see how each crisis had led to the next. How every solution I tried had created a worse problem. Tessa had been so good at what she did, staying 3 steps ahead, turning my own actions against me. The furniture switch that made me look scheming. The legal actions that made me look vindictive. The hospital visit that made me look unstable. She'd almost won. If not for Dorothy's phone call. If not for that tiny window of time before the psychiatric evaluation. If not for the hidden cameras I'd installed months earlier, Tessa would have succeeded. Bradley would have disappeared into a facility somewhere. All his money would be gone. And I'd probably be in jail for violating the restraining order. We'd come so close to complete disaster. Closer than I like to think about. But we'd survived. We'd won. Justice had been served, even though it had taken everything I had to achieve it. "What did you learn from all this?" Bradley asked. "Besides, don't trust beautiful women with 3 different names." I laughed, surprising myself. It was the first time I'd laughed in months. I learned to trust my instincts, even when everyone says I'm wrong. I learned that sometimes being right means standing completely alone. I learned that protecting the people you love is worth any cost. And I learned that evil often comes wrapped in a pretty package with a sad story and a charming smile. That's a lot of lessons. It was a lot of pain to learn them. Bradley squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you're my mom. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every day. You don't have to do anything to deserve love, sweetheart. That's the whole point. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love fights for you even when you've given up on yourself." The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Seagulls called overhead. The breeze carried the scent of salt and seagrass. We were broke. We were traumatized. We were exhausted. But we were together. We were free. And we were at peace. That was enough. More than enough. Sometimes winning doesn't look like what you expected. Sometimes it looks like sitting on a porch with your son, broke but breathing, wounded but healing, watching the sunset and knowing you'd do it all again if you had to. Because that's what love means. That's what family means. The trial was 6 months later. Tessa, whose real name was confirmed as Teresa Ann Winfield, faced 18 felony counts. The evidence was overwhelming. The hidden camera footage, the drug tests, Bradley's testimony, the previous victims who'd been located and freed from facilities. I sat in the courtroom every day. I wanted to see justice served with my own eyes. Tessa showed no remorse. Even in Prison Orange, she maintained an air of cold superiority. Her attorney tried various defenses, but nothing stuck. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 23 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. It would have been more, but she agreed to cooperate in locating other victims and returning stolen funds. Howard from Arizona was freed from the psychiatric facility where he'd been trapped for 6 years. He was only 41 years old but looked 60. 6 years of unnecessary psychiatric medications had taken a toll, but he was alive, and with proper care, doctors thought he'd recover much of his cognitive function. His family was reunited with him. His assets, most of which Teresa had hidden rather than spent, were being recovered. Douglas from Nevada was found alive. Teresa had faked his death and had him committed to a private facility in Montana under a false name. He'd been there for 4 years. Like Howard, he was damaged but alive. His family thought they'd buried him. The reunion was tearful and painful and beautiful all at once. Investigators found evidence of at least 3 other potential victims. The investigation was ongoing. Teresa had been running this con for over 15 years, moving from state to state, changing identities, leaving destruction in her wake. Edward Thorne faced ethics charges from the Bar Association but ultimately kept his license. He was sanctioned and fined, but he'd covered himself well enough to avoid disbarment. He released a statement saying he was horrified to discover his client's true nature and that he'd been deceived along with everyone else. I didn't believe him, but I also couldn't prove otherwise. Bradley slowly healed. Therapy helped. Time helped. He started dating again, carefully, after about a year. He was more cautious now, asked more questions, looked for red flags. He'd never be as trusting as he'd been before. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Garrett and I repaired our relationship. He visited more often, brought his kids to the beach house. We didn't talk much about the ordeal, but we didn't need to. He'd learned something too, that sometimes the person who seems crazy is actually the only one seeing clearly. I sold the apartment for $1.4 million, more than I'd expected. Used the money to rebuild my retirement savings and pay off the loan on the beach house. I even bought a new car, a practical sedan that got good gas mileage. The cheap furniture from the apartment became a bit of a joke in our family. Bradley wanted to keep one piece, the fake leather sofa, as a reminder. It sat in his new apartment, a strange trophy from the worst experience of his life. I kept thinking about that morning phone call. 6 a.m, Harold frantic on the other end. Tessa in the lobby with her moving men and her forged documents. How I'd smiled and told him to let her in, that she was about to find a surprise. I'd thought the surprise was the cheap furniture. But the real surprise was the cameras. The evidence I'd been gathering all along. The proof that would eventually bring her down. Looking back, I could see how every terrible thing that happened, every crisis that cascaded into the next worse crisis, was leading somewhere. Not to disaster, but to justice. It didn't feel that way at the time. At the time, it felt like drowning, like fighting a battle I couldn't win against an enemy who was always 3 steps ahead. But I'd won anyway. Not because I was smarter or stronger. I'd won because I refused to give up. Because a mother's love is relentless. Because I trusted my instincts when everyone told me I was wrong. Would I do it differently if I could? I don't know. Maybe I'd install the cameras sooner. Maybe I'd push harder for police involvement earlier. But maybe everything happened exactly as it needed to happen for the right outcome to occur. Bradley told me once that he'd felt guilty for putting me through everything. I reminded him that I chose to fight. Nobody forced me. I could have walked away at any point, saved my money and my peace of mind, let Bradley deal with the consequences of his own choices. But that's not what mothers do. That's not what love does. Love fights. Love perseveres. Love stands firm even when standing alone. Love pays the cost, whatever it is, because the alternative is unthinkable. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I learned that sometimes the legal system works, even though it takes forever and costs too much. I learned that there are still people, like Dorothy and Detective Raymond and Patricia, who'll do the right thing even when it's hard. I learned that evil is real, and it often looks charming and wounded and in need of rescue. That the most dangerous predators are the ones who make you want to protect them. And I learned that at 67 years old, I could still fight like hell when I needed to. That age doesn't diminish a mother's fierce love for her child. That instinct and intuition are real and valuable, even when you can't explain them logically. If you've read this story and you recognize something in your own life, trust those instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone seems too good to be true, they probably are. If your mother or father or friend expresses concerns about someone you love, at least listen. They might be seeing something you can't see because you're too close. And if you're fighting a battle that everyone tells you you've already lost, keep fighting anyway. Sometimes the only way out is through. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to quit. I'm 71 now. 4 years have passed since that terrible morning phone call. Bradley is 34, healthy, engaged to a wonderful woman named Sarah, who I've gotten to know well. She's kind, genuine, and has a real job and a real past that checks out in every way. Bradley is happy again. Cautious, but happy. The beach house is paid off, my retirement is secure, my health has improved, though I still take blood pressure medication. I have lunch with Patricia once a month. We've become good friends. Sometimes I drive past the building where the apartment was, though I don't go inside. It's strange to think about everything that happened there. The 28 years of memories, both real and fabricated. The furniture that looked valuable but wasn't. The cameras hidden in smoke detectors. The scene of a crime that almost destroyed my family. But we survived. We're stronger for it. We know what we're capable of now. Both the darkness humans can inflict and the love that can overcome it. On quiet mornings at the beach house, I sit on the porch with my coffee and watch the ocean. The waves never stop coming, never give up, never quit. They just keep rolling in, persistent and patient and unstoppable. That's how you win battles like the one I fought. You keep showing up. You refuse to quit. You trust that eventually, the truth will come out and justice will be served. It's not pretty. It's not easy. It costs more than you want to pay. But it's worth it. Because family is worth it. Love is worth it. Truth is worth it. And on the other side of hell, there's peace. I found that peace. It took everything I had, but I found it. And I'd do it all again if I had to. Every painful moment. Every dollar spent. Every sleepless night. Every time I stood alone against people who thought I was crazy, I'd do it all again. Because Bradley is here. He's whole. He's free. And Tessa is where she belongs, unable to hurt anyone else. That's victory. That's what winning looks like. Not perfect, not painless, but real. And that's enough. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to trust your instincts against everyone's advice? Have you ever fought for someone when everyone told you to give up? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have kept fighting? Or would you have walked away to protect yourself? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or taught you something, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's fighting their own battle and needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you never have to face what I faced. But if you do, I hope you remember that love is worth fighting for, that truth eventually wins, and that sometimes the person everyone thinks is crazy is actually the only one seeing clearly. Take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. Protect the people you love. And never, ever give up when it matters most. Until next time, may you find peace in your own journey, whatever that journey looks like.